All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a pretty dark, almost industrial empire of the mind. We're going to explore a deeply psychological commentary on human ambition. You know that fatal tension you sometimes feel? That tug of war between your own burning, chaotic evolution and that incredibly tempting offer of just rigid, absolute safety. That's exactly what we're looking at. We'll be breaking down the visceral struggle of your individual willpower pushing back against the heavy, suffocating weight of historical traditions. So let's get right into it.
First, I want you to listen closely to this concept of the Pale Redeemer. Now, this isn't some monster hiding under your bed, okay? Actually, it's way closer to home. It's the voice of your own internal shadow. Literally, your own internal jailer. It's the part of you that watches you strive, that watches your soul burn with this fever of unpredictable freedom, and, well, it offers you a sanctuary from that dangerous fever. It basically offers you a way out of the agonizing heat of transformation.
So that brings us to Act 1, The Parables of Stagnation, a dark commentary on ambition.
Let's explore exactly how this shadow scores its greatest triumphs over human ambition. It usually starts by turning your own past values into your literal prison. It's an eternal, visceral struggle happening inside you right now. On one side, we've got rigid safety. Think of the heavy weight of lead, cold perfection, atomic freezing. It's that cozy comfort of doing things the way they've always been done, right? Like staying in a soul-crushing job just for the absolute safety of a steady paycheck. But then, on the flip side, is your burning evolution. This is the agonizing heat of transformation and the incredibly unpredictable fluid nature of your spirit. And the Redeemer? Well, it desperately wants to pull you away from that fluid spirit and lock you down into a state of absolute static control.
So what does the architecture of this control actually look like? Well, we're going to walk through 3 distinct parables designed to completely extinguish the fluid nature of your spirit. As we go through these, notice how each one features a specific trap and a specific weapon used by the Redeemer to subvert your ambition and basically turn your living victories into dead, static monuments.
Okay, in this first one, the parable of the armor of truths, the Redeemer offers you what it calls a golden mask. But this mask is actually held up as a mirror to your own fatigue. I mean, you've been striving, you've been evolving, and honestly, you're tired. So the Redeemer whispers, hey, you're weary, just rest here within this gilded cage of absolute truths. It takes the heavy weight of your past values and presents them not as a burden you need to shed, but as protective armor. It totally tricks you into trading the dangerous fever of growth for cold, rigid perfection. And the real tragedy here, you never even realize that this so-called misguided act of salvation is actually the lock upon your own evolution.
Next up, we have the parable of the leaden harvest. Now, here, the Pale Redeemer acts as a sort of corrupted architect. It stalks those dark refractions of potential you've cast aside. Whenever you achieve a massive victory, when you really touch the brilliance of the stars, the Redeemer swoops in to perform intellectual salvage. It essentially takes your greatest, most vibrant achievements, the absolute gold of your stories, and smelts them right back down into the heavy lead of mortality. It entombs your brilliance within these leaden boxes, claiming it's preserving your light from decay. But actually, scratch that, it's not preserving anything. In truth, these boxes are anchors. They drag your evolving spirit right back down into the stagnant mud of the herd, turning your living victories into dead, predictable memories.
And finally, we reach the parable of the frozen moment. When the infinite light of the aurora really dances within your heart, the Redeemer unleashes winter's bite. It wields the breath of the void. Picture this as a bleak, ionized, freezing gale that literally siphons the warmth right out of your ambition. This represents the ultimate fear of change, right? Because to move is to live. So the Redeemer shatters the atoms of anything that dares to shine or shift. It weaponizes the logic of the crucible, but not for growth, for domination. It forces your fluid spirit of becoming into a single dead state.
Which brings us to Act 2, Silencing the Divine Eye, the Sentinel of Resentment.
But you've got to wonder, how does this internal shadow actually maintain this physical empire of ice and lead without you putting up a moral fight? Well, it happens through a dark psychological mechanism called the murder of the witness. Basically, to keep control, this shadow absolutely must silence your conscience, your divine eye. By willfully blinding your inner eye, the Redeemer stops you from seeing the cage you're actually trapped in. And that allows it to just brood over those possessed dead memories in total peace.
The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that the Pale Redeemer isn't some external enemy out to get you. It is your internal atavism. Think of it as an evolutionary step backward. It's that primitive, fear-based part of your own potential that is completely terrified of its own darkness and its own power.
It acts as this powerful internal jailer, a sentinel of resentment, standing guard at the gate of your mind, aggressively denying your soul's fluid evolution and preventing your inner light from its natural state, which is simply to shift and shine.
Moving on to Act 3, the logic of the crucible, the visceral struggle.
Now, you might be thinking you can just easily escape this internal jailer, but to do that, you have to face the agonizing, burning heat of the crucible, and it's a brutal fight. See, the internal jailer uses atomic freezing, using the breath of the void to siphon your warmth and establish static control. It weaponizes the idea of the crucible just to paralyze you. But the true logic of the crucible, that's entirely different. It requires painful, personal evolution. It's a visceral struggle where you must intentionally subject yourself to the fire to melt down those rigid, safe structures. The Redeemer is always going to offer you protective armor to avoid this fire. But here's the catch. Avoiding the fire means spiritual death.
So how do we actually break free? Well, it's a process. First, you absolutely must consciously risk the heat of the crucible. There's no way around it. Second, you have to actively melt down those rigid, leaden structures of static control. By refusing that absolute safety of the gilded cage, the heavy lead of mortality actually stops being an anchor and becomes your raw material, fuel for your spirit of becoming. And finally, step 3. You use that material to fuel your evolution, allowing you to reclaim the vibrant gold of your stories.
And that leads us to Act 4, the Dionysian rupture, shattering the stagnation.
Because honestly, melting the lead is really only the beginning. The ultimate rebellion here is what's called the Dionysian rupture. This is so fascinating because it isn't just about fighting your shadow, it's about transcending it completely. It's your absolute refusal to remain frozen. You're turning your visceral struggle into a joyful affirmation. By breaking that cycle of static control and spiritual entropy, you achieve alchemical integration. You stop running from your darkness and instead you integrate it to make yourself whole.
So, how does this rupture actually manifest in practice? Through what's called a grave dance. Yeah, you literally dance right on top of your past, engaging in what the text calls the gay science. It's a profound shift toward joyful, light-hearted wisdom. You completely reject the suffocating seriousness of the past values that once acted as your armor. Instead, as the creator, you learn to just smile at the void and you laugh at the very leaden boxes that were meant to entomb you.
By embracing terminal honesty, you finally unmask that internal jailer. You look the pale Redeemer right in the eye, recognize it as just a terrified part of yourself, and you integrate that internal atavism into a much higher vision. And as you do this, that heavy, oppressive spirit of gravity finally falls away. In its place, you achieve something incredible, the profound, fluid lightness of a creator.
Which brings us to the ultimate crossroads, presented in the voice of the pale Redeemer itself. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to take away from our explainer today. Will you have the courage to risk the agonizing, burning heat of the crucible to reclaim your gold? Or will you surrender to the seductive offer of absolute safety, remaining safely entombed as a frozen monument in a leaden box forever? The choice between your burning evolution and static control is entirely yours. Thanks for joining me.